Did you know that Abraham Lincoln's greatest fear for the United States of America wasn't that of an external power, nor was it that of internal conflict, which you can imagine was a huge problem at the time. The Civil War was pretty polarizing. Rather, his greatest fear for the United States at the time was that of human nature's impulse towards ambition and power. In his speech to the young men of Lyceum, Abraham Lincoln gave a pretty resounding talk about why he fears this aspect of our nature. The speech was pretty useful for a whole host of reasons because it touches on a lot of his ideas about what's wrong with slavery, what's wrong with the way in which people are taking towards mob rule. But specifically, what I found to be most fascinating is that stuff he said about ambition and power. And this is rooted in the fact that the United States was a revolutionary idea. It had been around for 50 years when he was writing this speech, but he knew even then how fragile this idea was. This idea being the fact that the United States was the only country at that time to be run by the people and for the people. In the rest of the world, there was monarchy. There were monarchies. There were people who were, who make the Saudi Arabian monarchy of today look, pretty reasonable. Because at that time period, it was considered divine right for whichever ruling family of each specific country to have these people subservient to them. And that was not the case with the United States of America. But this is what Abraham Lincoln loved, and yet he also knew that this is something that can so easily be taken away from us. And this is why he goes into detail when he's talking to these young men who are at the start of their lives. He himself was young when he gave this speech. He was only 28 years old and a newly elected congressperson to the state of Illinois. So not the whole entire country, but just his own specific state. It's prior to, his presidential ambitions. But what makes this so, I think, powerful for me is the stuff that he says about power. Because he says that power itself will corrupt. This is the specific line that I think was really important for me. Many great and good men are sufficiently qualified for any task they should undertake, may ever be found, whose ambition would aspire nothing beyond a seat in Congress, gubernatorial or even presidential chair. But such belong not to the family of the lion or the tribe of the eagle. What think you these places would satisfy an Alexander, a Caesar, or a Napoleon? Never. Towering genius disdains a beaten path. It seeks regions unexplored. It sees no distinction in adding story to story upon the monuments of fame, erected in the memory of others. It denies that it is glory enough to serve under any chief. It scorns to tread in the footsteps of any predecessor, however illustrious. It thirsts and burns for distinction, and if possible, it will have it, whether at the expense of emancipating slaves or enslaving freemen. It is unreasonable, then, to expect that some men possessed of the loftiest genius, coupled with ambition sufficient to push it to the utmost stretch, will at some point spring up among us. And when such a one does, it will require the people to be united with each other, attached to the government and laws, and generally intelligent, to successfully frustrate his designs. Long story short, what he's trying to say is that there needs to be a culture in America that loves the institution of America for America to succeed. Because if that culture, what he calls eventually a religion of the United States of America, doesn't persist, then eventually a powerful and ambitious man who is able to use his genius will come along and he will promise things that he knows aren't true but sound nice and will inflame our passions, the same passions that he believed led to the emancipation of the United States from Great Britain. But this time it will be the opposite of emancipation. It will be a dictator, an Alexander, a Caesar, or a Napoleon coming from the United States to imprison Americans and to get rid of this experiment that existed for 50 years at that time and now a lot longer. And I think that that's something we all have to reflect on, this idea of a religion of America. And I understand, I'm an immigrant, so I wasn't around for this. I don't know if I would have even been wanted in the audience at this time. And there were a lot of people of color who were around at that time who were explicitly not invited to such conversations, and those are Black Americans. And I can understand, this is something that I can imagine a Black American having a lot of time struggling to, go along with. But I think that's the question of this specific time period when it comes to American politics. Is the idea of the United States being a country for and by the people something that can be reformed such that every single person can view it as worth preserving? One of my favorite lines in recent politics was when Michael Cohen, the former lawyer for Donald J. Trump, former President Trump, was on stand and he was testifying. And I remember the person who was running the whole entire proceeding, Elijah Cummings, said that the greatest honor that the United States can do for its people is to preserve the Union. Whether or not you support Trump, or whether or not you support Michael Cohen, who at that time was testifying against Trump, or you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, or whatever, if we can preserve this Union that has been forged by blood, won by fighting for this revolutionary idea of for the people, by the people, and also for all of Black America's history of fighting to be seen as Americans. If that's something that can be handed down to the next generation intact, I think that would be a great success for all of us. And it's something that perhaps maybe it shouldn't be a religion of the United States, but perhaps it's something we should all aspire for. Thank you guys for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this video.